Councillor Watts, I believe it's up to you to speak against the motion.
Well, of course, I will. This is very worrying. Thank you, Mr. Cutter. My preference would have been, quite properly, I believe, for us to defer this decision until we have all of the information before us, and perhaps a recommendation from our officers, but we don't have a recommendation. We don't have the information before us. What we do have is, I think, a 4 or 5 page letter from an industry association with not one reference to the people who actually are conducting the event, IMG. Not one reference. We have a series of assertions throughout all of it which are contentious as far as I'm concerned. We have before us a lot of very worrying omissions. I'm very involved with the ambassadors to the Friends, as an ambassador to the Friends of the Royal Exhibition Buildings, so I know full well the position that the museum, for example, is taking about the way in which it will let space in the REB, which is a very important component of this show. And they are not projecting ahead to the same extent that our particular permission renewal of the licence will allow. A discussion has to be made around that. The letter that came in from the association talked at length about what a wonderful location it is, and it is. It doesn't talk about the constraints that this wonderful location has on the way in which events are conducted in the garden. And I am very pleased to discover that our officers are in the middle of, I'm not sure at what stage in the process it is, but they're developing a strategy about the way in which events impact or whatever events are occurring in our open space. Very necessary, I would have thought, before we make a decision such as this, a premature decision, in my view. The other thing that I see has not happened is that we haven't consulted with our neighbour, the City of Yarra, which again is very impacted by this particular event. It would have been common courtesy to actually find out what's going on in their minds around before we conduct or we go forward with this. What hasn't happened, in my view, either, is that we can't, at the one hand, say that this is a major hallmark event and not expect the same kind of rigour in analysis that happens in other hallmark events in our city. So I think the City of Melbourne has a bit of a job to do in relation to making sure our governance around this is right, and it's very important, I think, that we step through this. There have been claims in the past that yes, the use of this particular area is important. It's always had a role in commercial exhibitions. No one's arguing about that. But a couple of things have changed in relation to the south end of the Carlton Gardens, our only World Heritage Gardens. What's happened is a general alteration in the canopy and in the grounds. I was completely gobsmacked to find that our officers are saying things like, oh yes, we didn't have to repair as much this year as we did last year. World Heritage Gardens, we shouldn't be talking about remediation, we should be talking about improvement. So I'm very concerned that sort of can-do attitude is applied to our gardens. Yes, let's have it, but and let's fix it up afterwards because we don't have to pay for it. It's a self-funding event. Not a good enough attitude for me. We need a bit of a rethink about this World Heritage Site. What were the other aspect that hasn't been dealt with, and I think our submitter actually touched on it briefly. The reality is, in the last 21 years, the use of this garden by the public as public open space the demand for it has increased phenomenally. It's not rocket science, is it? Look how many people require access to this garden, and they are prevented from going there for an extraordinarily long period of time. We've had fights in the past or disagreements about what's appropriate bump in, bump out timing. And I must say it's only because of the community agitation around these kinds of management matters that we've got it in as the way it is now. It is improved on the way it was once conducted, thanks to the vigilance of the community. And of course that avenue for vigilance is no longer there because the committee has been disbanded. So I am very worried about this. I am worried that on the one hand this council in the same night can be talking about the Urban Forest Fund, and on the other hand seemingly ride roughshod over really serious issues in relation to this garden, which is why, and seeking evidence of this, I've been asking for aerial photographs to be taken. There is evidence, the community has presented it, that the south end of the garden looks totally different than the other end. We need to establish what's going on here. The southern end of the garden is in strife. Much as we care for it, much as we invest in remediation, it is in strife. So I'm loath to proceed with this motion, first of all on the governance area and in consulting widely enough on what's going on here before we commit the new council to an extended licence arrangement in this also. So I'm worried about the site, yes, and I'm worried about other matters as I've described to you, and I've spoken at length. As I said, my preference would have been for a deferral, but that did not meet with enthusiasm when I raised that earlier in the day. So I will be voting against this motion.